Hello, class. Today we're going to be talking about Judaism, and I would like to give you a little context of Judaism. If you look at the handout, we'll be talking about ancient Israelite religion and Judaism. What we know as Judaism today is a development from earlier scriptural religion. And so, if you recall, Judaism is a theistic religion. Theism is the view that God exists, God the Creator exists, and rules in the creation. And one of the ways in which God rules is through his revelation, his revealed word in the scriptures. So Judaism relies upon the scriptures, the Hebrew scriptures or the Old Testament. And Christianity will build upon the Jewish Hebrew scriptures, and we'll make a distinction between the Old Testament and the New Testament. So I'll be using both of those because we'll be talking about Judaism and Christianity. So if you look at the handout, we have the Biblical Worldview. We've gone over this previously. We talked about Genesis chapters 1, 2, and 3, and the three main themes of the scriptures. So, or the three main themes of the Genesis 1 through 3. And so I just want to review this a little bit. Remember, we talked about creation, and we talked about creation is ex nihilo. God is infinite in power. He brings about the created order, the physical world, from something himself, from non-physical. There's no previously existing matter. So the entire universe is created from no previously existing material. And this is distinct from dualism, where God is a maker or a former of the matter. This is God brings the matter into existence. And so the view of God in theism is that God is a spirit. He's not physical. He's infinite, eternal, and unchangeable in his being, wisdom, power, holiness, justice, goodness, and truth. So those are the attributes of God. And from those attributes, we can talk about other things. We'll see this develop. So once the material world is in existence, we have subsequent creation by separation and by forming and filling. We talked about that. We talked about there's no natural evil or moral evil originally in the world. The animals were given plants to eat, and so were the humans originally. Each thing was created after its own kind, and the humans were given this work of dominion or rule in which they were to develop all of the powers latent in the created order. And in doing that, they were to know God. So God created and rested. He did the work of creating, and humans are given this work of dominion. And at the end of that work, they too will rest. God gives them the Sabbath day, the day of rest, for them to remember their origin, their destiny, and their hope. And the humans are made in the image of God, and we talked about the many ways in which they're in the image of God. Okay, so that was creation. But then we also had the fall after that. So Genesis chapter 3, we see the fall. We also talked about God makes a covenant with Adam, and Adam represents all of humanity. And they also are given a covenant in marriage, the man and the woman. We talked about how the invisible reveals the visible, and that Eden was the biological and geographical center of all things, the drama. We talked about probation and manifestation, that they're given two trees in the middle of the garden that represented two ways. Remember, the visible revealing the invisible. And the two ways were the knowledge of God or the knowledge of good and evil, determining good and evil for themselves apart from God. The knowledge of God was the way of life, or the good, and the knowledge of good and evil was the way of death, spiritual death, and it was going to be the basis of human autonomy, determining good and evil apart from God, or them being gods unto themselves. We talked about sin, and the nature of sin is not seeking, not understanding, and not doing what is right. It was autonomy or unbelief and coming short of the glory of God. And this resulted in spiritual death. And we talked about spiritual death as meaninglessness, boredom, and guilt. And that this is a spiritual condition that goes on forever if there is not repentance. And we also talked about God allowing evil, moral evil, to deepen the revelation of his justice, which says pay the penalty for moral evil, and his mercy, which says cancel the penalty. All right, so that was all under the fall. We talked about redemption, and we saw that God does not leave them in this condition of moral evil once they turn away. He gives 3 calls back. The first call is an inward call in the form of shame. Their response is to cover it up in self-deception. The second call was an external call. He asked, "Where are you?" which is a kind of call for self-reflection. Their response was to blame others in self-justification. So now we see that they're in this condition of moral evil, spiritual death, self-deception, and self-justification. And it's in that condition that God calls them the third time with the curse and the promise. So the curse, remember, is toil, strife, old age, sickness, and physical death. And this is going to require another covenant head. Just to give you a preview, someone is going to have to come and do what Adam failed to do, perfectly obey, and undo what Adam did, brought evil and death into the world. And that's including natural evil. So the promise is that one will come, remember the seed of the woman will come and destroy the serpent, crush the serpent's head. So the curse, there's going to be toil, strife, old age, sickness, and death. The promise, there will be an age-long, agonizing spiritual battle in which good overcomes evil. And this is the promise that's going to run throughout the entire scriptures. The promise will be fulfilled through the seed of the woman. And this leads to Adam and the woman repenting and having faith. And he names his wife Eve because she will become the mother of all the living. So they're going to live under the condition of the curse and continue in obedience, doing the work that they were called to do, the work of dominion that they had turned away from. And they're going to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it as they were originally commanded to do. God responds to their repentance and faith with justification. He covers them with coats of skin. And remember, this symbolizes through the death of another, their sin is covered. So God is going to provide the covering. This is the first intimation of how God is going to save the humans. Then the next response from God is sanctification. So we have these theological terms. Justification connected to forgiveness, sanctification connected to cleansing. And they're expelled from the garden at this point to undergo the process of cleansing from their moral evil, their sin, and they have to now learn the hard way under the curse. And they're going to gain knowledge through suffering. Now remember, toil, strife, old age, sickness, and death is a callback. It's not punishment, and it's a callback from moral evil. And you would expect as moral evil increases, the curse will also increase. So as we go through the scriptures, there will be times when we see the curse intensified. We'll see war, famine, and plague. And you would also expect as moral evil decreases, natural evil will decrease. And that's the promise, that as there's less moral evil, as good overcomes evil in that spiritual war that's age-long and agonizing, the curse will be lifted. Okay, so we should look for clues about the Messiah. So we have the intimation of the Messiah in Genesis chapter 3. The seed of the woman will crush the head of the serpent. The seed is singular. And we also have this idea that natural evil is imposed because of moral evil. And if it's imposed, it's merciful. It's a callback. God is being merciful. And God is also just. So there has to be payment for moral evil. So this should give us some clues about what we should expect. We should expect a person, a representative head, to come and do what Adam failed to do, obey, and undo what Adam did, bring moral evil and natural evil. So the Messiah should undo that. All right, so I'm thinking this is a nice little unit. I might wrap up this little unit on the biblical worldview and say the rest of the scriptures is an unfolding of the promise and how that's going to come about. How is God going to redeem humanity from moral evil? What should we expect in the Messiah? And has the Messiah come? How would we know? All right, so that's also inclusive of the expectation of Judaism and Christianity. Who's the Messiah? Who's going to undo what Adam did and do what Adam failed to do? Oh, that's a nice cliffhanger, isn't it? All right, so this was on the biblical worldview. We looked at the creation, fall, redemption. This is review from what we've gone over already. And next we'll start talking about ancient Israelite religion.